Hello students, here's a video guide for your first journal submission. Let me open it up. It is a definition, and we will use the three pieces that we've read. What is Poverty by Parker, Why I Want a Wife by Brady, and Tortillas by Bresciaga as inspiration. If you look at the three options, the first prompt says to title the response Why I Want a Husband. The key to doing well on this is to be ironic. Don't write from the perspective of a woman who really wants a husband who has these certain characteristics. Instead, mimic Brady's response. She's writing as a wife who feels maybe somewhat taken for granted and overworked. And so you'd write the same way. Write as a husband who feels taken for granted and overworked. And consider some of the things that husbands do. Like typically, what are some of their responsibilities in the home? You know, maybe they take care of the yard and the car and the discipline and the bills and take out the trash and fix, what needs to be fixed, the honey-do list. And so that would be the perspective that I want you to take on that response. Also, let me go ahead and pull up the Brady piece. You can mimic her style where she does use quite a bit of repetition where she says, I want a wife, I want a wife, I want a wife. She does that to emphasize the many, many responsibilities of a wife. You too can do that. Just be careful so that you're not saying it too much, so it doesn't become repetitive and a little bit monotonous. Okay, so like she also opens with a nice backstory that details why she started thinking about this topic in the first place. So you may wish to do that as well. And you can even end it like this. My God, who wouldn't want a husband? Okay. Now the other piece that is inspiration is tortillas. And so what Bresciaga does that's beautiful in this piece, he describes this very familiar food. To most of us it's familiar. He breaks his little essays into different parts, and so he talks about his childhood memories of a tortilla. He talks about the ancient history of the tortilla, and then he describes how they're made in his community, and the factories are homemade as well. He also describes different ways to eat it, different foods to make with it. And then he goes into the spiritual meaning or use of a tortilla, and then finally the artistic uses. And so he gives us an entirely new perspective on tortillas. So for that prompt in the journal, the food prompt, it tells you to describe a food. And so it also says to make sure that it's a food that's important to your family or your ethnicity or your culture. And describe it, assume that we're not familiar with the food. Now, we're familiar with tortillas, but we maybe didn't know the history behind it and how they're made and, different uses for it. And so when you write about your food, just assume that we're unfamiliar. Also, we need to feel like with Bresciaga's piece, we know he loves tortillas. They have significant meaning to him, his family, his culture, its history. And so when you describe your food, if you decide to do this option, make sure you present it in the same manner. And finally, Parker, she defines poverty. And it goes into such great detail about poverty. And I want to look at it real quickly, the different techniques she uses to help you. So you can do the same. You can mimic it as well. First of all, she opens almost every paragraph with poverty is. And she talks about the smells of poverty. She talks about how the unhealthy lifestyle. She addresses many of the preconceived notions of people who live on the outside of this kind of poverty. Like some people would say, get a job and you'll be fine. Or what about education? Once you get an education, things will be okay. Well, in her essay, she argues that that's not necessarily true. And she talks about some of the hypocrisy of people who criticize the poor and yet take advantage of them at the same time. And so I just like how she begins every paragraph. Poverty is dirt. Poverty is staying up all night. Poverty is asking for help. Poverty is remembering. And so the prompt that you are supposed to do is write about something where you feel like you're an expert on it. Like Parker is an expert on poverty. It's clear that either she has lived this life or she's very close to people who have. And she's trying to get us to experience the true demeaning shame that a lot of people experience. And so for your prompt, you would write a definition about something that you have some expertise. And it could be about a particular environment, like if you live in the inner city or you live out on a farm. And so that could be your topic. Or it could be, a child of divorce, like this says. I also thought you could write about, like personally, I could write about aging. And I could use Parker's essay as an example where I address the different struggles of aging. Like aging is feeling the aches and the joints every morning and finding it more difficult just to get out of bed, perhaps. And so that's how you would do this response. Okay. And I think that's it. You will submit it right here, create a journal entry, give it a title, and then write. And the key is to use some of the strategies that these professionals have used. They have the metaphors, they have the imagery, they have just details, beautiful, specific details. Okay, and good luck.